When a Ghaziabad builder with a record of developing several residential projects commits suicide because of severe cash crunch, when one of the country's largest real estate company, Unitex promoters, languish in jail, and another, JP Infra, is dragged under the insolvency code, when companies from Amrapali in the north to Prajay in the south are close to being declared sick, you know we are staring at a big crisis in Indian real estate. And no amount of big numbers like $4 billion of PE money can gloss over that fact. Because 80% of this so-called money is a handful of mega deals in commercial, not residential. Bottom line, this government needs residential real estate to restart because that is 3/4 of the entire real estate pie. It needs construction and jobs to come back. But the strategy is all hinging on affordable housing as a panacea for all. Hello everyone, I'm Manisha Natarajan and here are the three big questions on urban reality today. First, who will bail out residential real estate? Because with RERA, demonetisation and economic slowdown, there seems to be little light at the end of the tunnel for any developers other than the top 50-60 names. Our second question, should banks not be the ones to really ease up the lending for stuck projects, or should government come in? Because treating real estate with so much caution is only causing more distress and developers are rushing to high-cost PE debt. And three, this government seems to be banking on affordable housing heavily. Will that alone restart residential market engine? Joining me today to give their perspective is Sunil Rohakale, MD and CEO of ASK Investment, Pankaj Bajaj, MD Eldeco Infrastructure and President NCR Credai, Anshul Jain, MD Cushman and Wakefield, and Ritesh Vora, Partner, RE Investments, IDFC Alternatives Limited. Pankaj, of course, as the industry representative, the first question goes to you. The recent suicide of the Ghaziabad developer, what is it? Is it because he overextended, really didn't get his math right or didn't get the right funding? What happened here?
All of them. Plus,
all of them?
Yeah, absolutely. And the market not supporting him. The traditional model has been upended, as you know. The advances from customers have dried up because of the crisis of credibility and the three shocks that you talked about, RERA, GST, demonetisation. So developers who were depending on advances from customers as a source of funding, they have been left high and dry, and some of them can't take it anymore.
How much of this
the government
is
not and the government is not helping.
All right. So you're saying that they miscalculated, they're not seeing light at the end of the tunnel, government is not helping. Sunil, I'm going to come to you. Should the government step in to help? I mean, what's going on? Clearly, developers barely had any skin in the game. They were working on advances from buyers. They've miscalculated the moves. Sales are not happening now. Why look at the government to build them?
See, I'll tell you, frankly, there are multiple challenges industry is been facing for almost a decade. Post-global crisis, I think 2009, we have postponed the problem of our non-performing assets in real estate by first time. The Reserve Bank of India allowing the restructuring, allowing restructuring to the banks and housing finance companies. And that's where I think the largest problem have started accumulating. Because instead of really controlling the overdebtedness at that point of time and focusing more on execution and doing projects which probably can be completed within the 3 to 5 year horizon, I think expansion was little mindless, diversification was a little mindless, and at the same time, I think as an economy, we have seen never a great recovery as far as real estate is concerned. We still were looking reasonably fine till early 2013. Post 13, I think we had a false alarm of the new government, and I think a lot of people misread the recovery of the economy and probably the benefits to the Indian real estate, probably started seeing the colors late 15, late 16 and 17. I think the biggest hurdle at this point of time is not that government need to bail out by giving any money at this point of time, but give a small example. A city like Mumbai, one of the largest populated cities, vertical cities. Last 1.5 years, this city did not have a single approval of a residential project because there is a dumping ground issue going on. Now, if the issues like this, what would happen to a developer, even though he puts his own capital, or a private equity who will put money with the developer and do not have an approval for 1.5 years' time? I think any business model will fail. So my guess is at this point of time, there are multiple issues need to be handled. One of the biggest one is that the ease of doing business. If the real estate as an industry across the states, if we can get the 30 days approval or a 90 days approval, assured approval for all the projects, my sense is that is the first leg of recovery I see as a bailout package, and not really anything else is required. So that is the first part where I get that point, Sunil. The government
5 years that I have been doing real estate, I think the single biggest demand has been ease of doing business and approvals which get stuck, the changing goalpost which happens. Anshul Jain, do you support this argument that, bailing out is not what is required? It is just that don't keep changing the rules of the game, don't keep coming out with new, rules which send the entire industry into a tailspin, and get those approvals going. Because at ground level, 3.5 years into this government, nothing seems to have changed if you speak to the developers when it comes to approvals and graft.
Look, there's no question about that. I wholeheartedly support Sunil here, because we've now introduced RERA, which is fantastic for the consumers. But at the end of the day, you got to ease up the way the developers do business from a regulatory perspective. And I think we've been talking about it. I actually don't want to focus too much more on that, except a wholeheartedly yes. But what I would say to your previous question, should government bail out the sector? I mean, the answer is absolutely no, right? Because this is a mess which is created by private sector themselves, and they need to dig themselves out of this, right? And I think the developers, particularly the fringe developers, probably need to read that future, need to read that tea leaves, rather than hoping and praying that the markets will improve and the sale will start this Diwali or that Holi or whatever that good moment is in life, because that is not going to happen for some time at the moment. And therefore one needs to look at their own balance sheets and not drive themselves up to a point when unfortunately there's no other option left but to take drastic steps, such as the Ghaziabad developer you spoke about. And therefore, I think, people must do those deals, take very deep haircuts, and get other developers or funds involved in the business, so that the problem can then be, it can then move to another table at a solvable stage. So that's number one. Coming back to the government, yes, the government help is absolutely required. And I will only compare this to what happened during the GFC or global financial crisis in the US, when the government actually sat down with a bunch of private bankers and said, how do we actually create an environment to bail the economy out, not necessarily by giving money from the government sector. So here I think the government could play a role in bringing in perhaps the private financing options, whether it's large NBFCs or large sort of private banks, and say, or even government banks, and say, can we create a framework where we can create a corpus of money to go after the distressed assets and help solve that problem. Because, I'm totally against giving money as a bailout to the sector. But, if some developers who are seeing and who are reading that future get encouraged and say, let's get rid of that problem by taking a deep haircut, there has to be a money pool also available on the other side. And I think that's where government can help in just putting together a few minds.
Okay, all right. I think, Deepak Parekh in an op-ed that he wrote talked about a distressed asset fund. I'm going to come to you, Ritesh Vora. Are the developers that you are meeting right now, have they really smelled the coffee? Are they willing to take a haircut? What is going on? Give me some sense of what's happening when they approach you for the money. What is that color of money as well, which you're willing to give?
Sure. Manisha, I want to just take a step back on the previous question. And while I totally agree with the problem statement that you put out, I somehow disagree with the solution that is being passed around the table. Currently, the situation that these distressed projects are in, I think there is no real chance that any other, lender, distress fund, private equity investor, private banker, et cetera, will come in and say that, listen, you need to complete this project, you need 500 crores, here is 100 crores, start off. Because nobody, save and except maybe for a very few funds and maybe a very few developers and projects, I don't think that's a solution that's possible for the wider market. My fundamental belief is that, it's such a high-risk gamble that, there aren't really going to be too many takers. And I genuinely think that the only solution in this current situation that we have as far as distressed projects are concerned is for, a three-way or a four-way combination to come in, with the government or the local bodies acting as a facilitator, which we are seeing in many cases they are doing. The customers coming in, because ultimately they are the ones who are actually, hit the hardest. The existing lenders and a contractor. The developer at best in this particular situation is a counterparty or a confirming party to this arrangement. But ultimately, I think what needs to happen is that the customers need to come up and say that, we agree with a particular solution. The project has approvals. The government says, here is the contractor who's going to come in and complete the project. This is the escrow account. It's only the customers who've already put in 40, 50, 60% of the money and need to pay the balance 40% who can actually make this engine churn. No third-party money is going to come in. The customers have to come in and take, the comfort of the government and a new contractor being in place.
Would you agree with that, Pankaj? I got that, Ritesh. Would you agree with that? Because Greater Noida Authority is considering, I believe, a fund where monies can be made available to developers here, though, they're saying. But I mean, there has to be a solution to get out of these stuck, unfinished projects before the engine restarts.
So I agree with Ritesh to the extent that that may be applicable for deeply distressed projects. Projects which have no juice at all, so there's not enough money to be made for another developer to step in, or for private equity to be extending money, or for the bank to be extending money.
Let's take JP. For example, is there juice? Okay.
I'm not privy to the financials of JP, but let us assume for a minute that there is no juice left.
No juice left.
So that with that disclaimer, let us say the project is in the negative. The amount of money which is required to be spent to complete the project is more than the amount of money which is left in terms of receivables or FSI or what have you. So in that case, no banker or no fresh banker or no developer is going to touch it. So what happens? The only stakeholders left, the equity of the promoter is wiped out, so he's out. Who are left? The bankers are left, the authority is left, and the customers are left. So they need to, as Ritesh said, they need to top up the money. Now, in what percentage they will top up the money, and they will, so somebody say, what does it mean to the common man? If he's bought an apartment for 50 lakhs, he's already paid 45 lakh rupees. He has to pay another 5 lakhs, but he's not getting, it's a semi-built project. So, okay, he agrees to pay another 10 lakh rupees.
So, you're saying even customers have to be willing to take a haircut.
So, when equity,
everyone has to top up.
So, everybody has to top up and get the project. And it's not a bad idea, because you've already spent 45 lakh rupees, spend another 10 and retrieve your 45. So, what's wrong with that? So, that's fine. Number one. That's for, so there's one category of projects which is deeply distressed. Let me clarify that that is not the case with the entire industry. Let us not say that the entire industry and all the developers and everything is deeply distressed.
No, we're not saying that.
In the case of Greater Noida, possibly what they need, and possibly in the case of JP also, I do not know, possibly all that they need is an injection of working capital. So that one can see, and it happens case to case.
So who will give that working capital?
So that working capital can, if there's enough juice, there can be a commercial agreement between a private equity provider like Sunil or Ritesh or a bank. Or if there is no such funding forthcoming, then that equity can be put together by way of a distress fund put together by the government body, like it happened in the US in 2008. They bailed out General Motors, if you remember, and General Motors is thriving today. So that can happen. Greater Noida is talking about it. Maybe they'll put together a fund where they can give some soft loan because all the projects in Greater Noida are affected to some extent. You can't say that the developer messed up there. Something happened to the sector.
Even the authorities, I mean, goalposts, rules, everything keeps changing. Then NGT order came in, all construction stopped. Many participants for this mess, which is residential real estate. Like Pankaj said, it's not widespread to call it like, end of the game, but definitely it needs to be resolved. But more importantly, rules of the game have changed. Projects were earlier sold on paper. But now early stage projects have few takers, so developers have more skin in the game. Now, how do they get funding for that? What are the structures which are being explored? Because you do need the larger real estate residential sales to pick up, which have actually plunged. I'm looking at the figures, 41% in the top 8 cities of India. Stay with us.